Good afternoon, and welcome to our Two Enrollment Guys webinar. We're really super excited to have you all today. I am Josh Postromowitz. I have been in higher education for about 15 years and just recently joined the Media Cross team as our enrollment and marketing consultant.
And my name is Corey Baker. I am the senior lead strategist here at Media Cross. I've been here over a little over a year. Have about 13 years of higher ed experience, both in the college admission side, college marketing, as well as obviously agency and CRM implementation and sales.
All right, and we are going to go ahead and get it. So straight out the gate, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. I've wanted to say that for I can't tell you how long.
I didn't, but that's okay.
All right, well, we're going to start off with a couple quizzes here for us real quick. Just to let you all know, directly below is a question section. So at any point, if you have any questions, our VP for Higher Education, Jess Sachier, is going to be moderating that, and then we're also going to handle a Q&A at the end. So if we don't get to answer you right away, it's okay, we'll address it in the end.
Yeah, and what you'll notice is you can add questions on the bottom of the screen. Ask away. If she can answer right away, she'll answer. If not, we'll answer the questions. And then on your side,
there you go.
There is the chat. So you can also chat in there. We're going to post a link for this quiz and really kick it off. Really wanting to know a little bit more about our audience and who all's out there.
Alrighty, so in the chat section, I just posted a link there for you. If you'll copy and paste that, unfortunately you can't click it, but if you'll copy and paste that and put it into a new web browser, I'm gonna kind of go over real quick to the actual quiz itself. And so we can actually show our results here. I'm gonna make it big for us here. Alrighty, so the first question is your campus back to normal operations? And the votes are coming in real quick. It looks like the nopes have got it.
Nothing's normal anywhere, I don't feel.
Yep, they're still coming in. We've got a few folks that are walking back into campus. I feel probably the nopes are a little bit jealous.
Yeah. But even here, we're trying to keep distance from each other. We're two enrollment guys, but we gotta stay apart, which is nice.
All right, yeah, the majority definitely says this note that we're definitely not on campus yet. All right, going back into the second question here for us, is really looking at your challenges, in particular, specifically when it's mentioning into communications. And so there's a listing of about 7 different items there. If you'll actually go ahead and just start collecting and putting in there kind of where your priorities lie, what is most challenging for you, all the way to, you're not as concerned in terms of the actual challenge in itself.
And this is going to help us a few of these we'll be able to talk about a little bit in the presentation today. Obviously, communication is a broad brushstroke. We're not going to be able to cover everything and not going super in depth on a lot of things. But this will help us understand who we're talking to, where you are, and really for potential future webinars, where are things that you need to know a little bit more about that we potentially could help with, or even answer questions after the webinar, just in some chats, next week or the week after.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think to no surprise, lack of cohesiveness and creating content and the budget. The top 3 clearly as they're kind of shifting around a little bit. But those are 3 that I think that we're going to address a good bit today. So hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. I don't think anybody is too significantly surprised by that. But it definitely helps, I think, in terms of moving forward, how we can support you and how we can really cover additional information for you. So I'm going to jump back into our presentation here real quick. All right.
So first comes first, where do we start? So the one thing that really we started this on the higher ed side at Media Cross is actually Jessica, our VP of higher ed, Josh and myself, we've all been in admissions. So not only have we we've been in your shoes. We have sat, we've been traveling the road. We have ate the crappy college fair lunches. We have built communication plans. We have implemented CRMs. We have done it all. I've personally freshman transfer, adults, a little bit of everything. So when we talk about these today, we're really hoping while we can give you some insight of our experiences, but something helpful that you're able to take away today and maybe take nuggets and implement them right away, or just be like, oh, I've never thought of that. This might be really beneficial to us. That is one of the biggest goals of today, is to give you information that is actionable. Because we saw budget's a big concern, and so not all the time can you go out and pay for someone to do things. And so we want to give you some opportunities to do some stuff on your own. And then if there is support you need, we'll talk later that there are opportunities for that as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of times reiterating is you're probably not doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the big critical piece. And it's not to say that you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. There's so many different spectrums, but it's how can you improve upon the good work that you're already doing and getting the maximum results of the maximum effort that you're already putting in. And so just to kind of help fine tune that and give you some additional support.
Well, if you're not communicating, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But on top of that, think of what you have already as a base. And all we're going to do is continue to build upon that. And we'll work through that together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alrighty, well, Audit and Organize. So this is probably one of the best starting places. And there is not necessarily a wrong way to audit. Sometimes there could be a bad way of organizing, but really it's just getting all your information together, however that means for you. When I was a director, it was a combination of whiteboards, it was sticky notes. I love my sticky notes. It was Excel sheets, it was using the CRM, and just really it's super important to pull all that information together. You don't want to leave anything out. I know it's a lot. It takes some time and some effort to get all those things together, but it really is going to pay off in terms of the long run of having a cohesive communication flow across all boards.
And there's going to be times you're going to feel like this guy here, where it's just chaos. You're putting things up. I moved to the digital side where I was using at the time like inspiration maps to map out my flows, and then using the whiteboard. And it just seemed like things were everywhere, and we're drawing arrows between things to the point it made no sense. However, we were able to understand where all the flows went. So where our print was going, where our email was going, where did text messages layer in over that, and then on top of that, digital. So all these areas we were able to put into one area, one Excel sheet at that time, and understand where it was go and add different flows based on different audiences. So really some tips and tricks we're going to be working on. The first in the big picture area, and it sounds as plain and simple as it can be, but your content should continue to grow. So you don't want to run out the gate with all of your information right up front. You should be seeding it in bite-sized pieces from the point of, lead or suspect, depending on your funnel terminology, through your prospect stage and through your apps, through confirms and deposits, all the way to matriculants. If you run out the gate and send all your information to your leads, and then you don't send it again later, you're going to run into these issues where some students may jump in your funnel right away at the beginning and follow that traditional path that you would expect and see most of your messages. Other students are going to stealth in at the app level, or even if they come in normal, they apply and they deposit instantly, they miss that whole application flow. So your deposit flows got to at least mimic and have similar topics in there that are building up upon each other, so that those who see all of them continue to get more and new information, but those who didn't see it at a certain level, they at least get some other information in those spots.
Absolutely. I think it's important. Just like when you're watching a movie, the storyline grows. Throughout the entire thing, you don't find out who the bad guy is at the very beginning. You've got to wait through and really get to know those characters. And so that's what you're ultimately doing in a communication flow. It has to grow. It has to keep you interested. In addition to that, you should always be closing. And I know that that's kind of, I think, like that so out of the box term. But it's so true that your call to action has always got to be front and center, regardless of what your communication, what you're trying to communicate to your students. If it is visiting campus, then you know what, that needs to be very clear that scheduling a campus visit is top of mind. And you make it easy in the communication to do so. If it's to apply, if you are just generally letting them know about your financial aid process, there still is a call to action, whether that be they have to apply before they can get submit the FAFSA, or if it is talking about student organizations, what is the call to action? What are you trying to get them to do in order to, or really the whole purpose of your communicating with them? I mean, the worst thing you can do is just kind of throw content out there that's just for general knowledge, because ultimately that's not going to benefit you, and it's not going to benefit the student either.
Yeah, and then next up, you want to be dynamic. Now, I'm going to start with, I'm going to assume we run the spectrum of how many people have a CRM, or the value that you see in your CRM and the tools that it actually offers. Is it a glorified database, or is it actually the full-fledged tool that does everything for you? But even if you have that, do you have the staffing to do it? Do you have the time to build out dynamic content? So if your CRM has the opportunity for dynamic content, make sure you're using that. One, it can save you some time down the road, because one message can hit multiple audiences just by changing the call to action appropriately. But also, if you don't have a CRM that can do that, where are those areas that you can develop mini campaigns that are dynamic based on data points that you have in the system that you've collected through the inquiry phase, through the applicant, through surveys, through campus visits? What do you know about them? And even down to the basics, the really basics of it. Many schools do this. My old school that I did, I was guilty of it. We sent the message to everyone the same. It didn't matter if they were 5 minutes down the road from us or 2 states over. There's a lot of messages that we really should have thought about the way we talked about our town. We don't want to talk about our town to the locals. They know our town. What can we talk about the benefits of staying in town? And what can they do that's going to help them grow and benefit, versus the out-of-state students. I really want to know, if I'm coming there, what am I getting? It's going to be all new brand new content from them. And then also the really easy ones, who's visited, who's not. It's the worst. If you know something on a student, you know they visited, and then you're inviting them to visit again, they don't trust you. They're like, they don't even pay attention. They don't even know me. It's little things. Some schools that have like a banner in their email that says apply, the best thing you can do once they get to a certain stage, or if it's dynamic, it changed from apply to visit your university link. It takes that element of like, I know I visited before, and I know students will come back, but if they really want to come back, they're going to find that information.
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than destroying a relationship right out of the get-go by sending an email that has something as simple as a header banner that is standard for most institutions that say visit now, when you have a student who may even have been deposited and say, whoa, I visited 3 times and you're still telling me to visit again? You don't know exactly who I am. And it really does a detriment to that relationship.
Yeah, and really we want to talk a little bit too about drip campaigns. Again, CRM functionality different. Some are drag and drop and it's pretty easy. Others you're really building out based on dates and the time and making sure it all goes out. But ideally when it comes to drip and date specific messages, you're going to have both. That's ideal, and you're going to expect that, because if you have an upcoming visit event, you're going to want to go 6 weeks out through the first reminder, so many out, re-invite them, re-engage, let them know what the visit day is all about. And then you're going to have opportunities where you're going to want to communicate them on an ongoing basis, where you send a message and it might be based on their stage, and then 7 days later, something else goes out, 10 days later, 2 days later, whatever that flow looks like for your university is going to be really important that you're building that out. Now, if you don't have that kind of capability in your CRM where it looks at, okay, a drip email is going today and a date-specific email is going, don't send one till tomorrow. Some CRMs are smart enough to do that. It'll look at that information and be like, okay, I'm going to push this so they don't get multiple emails in one day. Some aren't, but there's ways to think outside the box. So if you know my CRM doesn't do this, and with drip campaigns just going, 7 days later, it could fall any day of the week, you might want to think about scheduling your date specific maybe before 11 and all your drips after 2. It at least spreads out. And if they get both emails in one day, it was a little bit of gap in there, and it doesn't seem like you don't know who they are.
Absolutely. And I think some of the tips to creating drip timelines is to really follow, the admissions year. And I know that's changing, seems daily these days. But I mean, there's still an opportunity where that there's going to be that initial interest. And so hopefully the majority of your students you're communicating at that sophomore, junior year, or prior to with your transfer students, prior to submitting an application. And so knowing that information, it has time to grow over the course of, a year, 2 years, in terms of, really setting up a communication. So you're not emailing them every day for a year before trying to get them to apply, is you're really kind of spacing that out. But if a student comes in, their senior year and it's October, we've got to get the application in. We've got to start talking about FAFSA. So you may want to create a separate communication flow for your regular admission students that come into that pipeline at a regular timeline, versus students, if you are rolling admissions, if a student comes in February, March, April, my gosh, we've got a lot to accomplish in a very short period of time. And you don't want them going into that initial drip flow, because it could be 12 days before they get an actual reply message. And you don't want to wait any longer. And so creating kind of multiple drip campaigns, depending on when the student actually falls into your pipeline, is really super helpful to help kind of add that drive to get them to get the application in sooner, or whatever that case may be.
And one thing to really think about is your timeline and deadlines on those. It's not necessarily you have to write, if you have 12 emails in your first trip and in the fall, 12 new ones. It's reusing similar content, but making sure it's appropriate for the time and deadlines that are approaching, and making sure that you turn drips off and know the length of the drips so that they don't keep going after deadlines. And they're getting information to do something after a deadline has passed. If it's truly a hard deadline, you don't want that going.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, this is a big one. Avoid making them drink out of a fire hose. There is times when just information overload's happening. There's opportunities when, like, the one example I have is like an honors college. They want to send an email. They send you the content. It's a letter and a half. But they wanted to go in email because, they've learned recently that email's key, not a letter now. But they just want the content to look the same. It's overwhelming. If there's call to actions in it, they're going to be missing it when long form content's coming in. This might be an opportunity to split that long form into multiple emails and doing a drip for those students. So you're re-engaging them for the honors college and having those conversations. And even if that opportunity is not there, you have the ability to potentially make a landing page where they can get digestible information, or is an opportunity to make a short video regarding that content where it's going to engage students.
Can you guys define drip?
Sure, absolutely. So a drip campaign typically is a set of communications, whether that be anywhere from email communications, text message communications, even to print communications. Creating a drip is basically setting a timeline behind those communications. And so most CRMs, this is probably the easiest if you've got a CRM that has an emailing or a communication format, that you'd set up your initial email. And that may be in my experience, it was an email from the director of admissions. And then 3 days later, the email would you would set up a second email or communication that would kick off from their admissions counselor. Then you'd set up another 7 days out talking about your academic programs. So that full spectrum of communication, when you add a specific timeline to when it's being delivered automatically, that in itself would be considered a drip campaign.
And I think the biggest difference when you think about date and time, so you're like, yeah, I do emails where one goes now, one goes 7 days later, one goes 7 days later. But usually the drip is dependent on the enter date. So the date, a lot of times it's just, you'll use a status and the date for that field. So whenever a student becomes an applicant, they enter the applicant drip campaign based on that date, and the instant email goes out. And then 7 days from that, if I apply 4 days later, you start at the beginning of that drip campaign. So I'm still getting all the emails, it's just at a slightly different timeline as we're going along. And again, making sure it ends that appropriately so you're not getting them after deadlines too.
Or you don't have a happy holidays that's going out that is actually sent in February. So it is really super important, again, to when you're looking at your email, to ensure that you know what are those dates that these need to be turned off, especially for folks that don't necessarily have a robust CRM. Usually CRMs you can set a date that it shuts off, but you really need to be very just cognizant of it when you're not utilizing a CRM to be able to help you and support you in that fashion.
And when you're looking at those, it can become overwhelming. You in that chair, drive yourself every time. It can be overwhelming to look at drips because you're like, well, I mean, basically at some point, almost every one of those emails could be going out that day to different students based on when they came in and when they fell. And so it is a lot to wrap your head around. Don't be the only one to set it up. Make sure you have trusted colleagues and some people who may be slightly out of the loop, because then they're not in it. They're looking at it with a new set of lens to understand, okay, these are going out here, these are going out here. Also, sometimes they're finding your mathematically minded, those very logical people, really helps because they look at it on logic, and we're looking at the marketing and the sale and everything else that goes along with it, but they have the ability to kind of look at it slightly different too.
Absolutely. And then after you kind of put all this together, again, going back to that kind of full spectrum, look to see where your gaps are. Look to see if there's any communications that are critical for your students to know. Sometimes this is a general visit piece, or if it's an open house, and so really encouraging to come visit. Anything from academic programs, really splitting those out. Again, we don't want to see, or students don't want to see here's all of our academics. They're really looking for specifically their program. And so, is program-specific information, is that missing from your communication flow? And creating an opportunity to where you can begin to build that into it.
Yeah, and I talk about per population a lot because I had a robust communication flow. You look at a calendar, there was stuff going out every month, and it felt like we were constantly setting up dates specific and getting dates on the calendar. And if you looked at a calendar overall, it looks good. But one thing we noticed after digging a little deeper is during that late December, January, February, where many of us are putting on scholarship competitions and all that, we were constantly emailing a population of students to register. Don't miss out on this scholarship. Here you go. And then also looking at, multicultural scholarships tend to fall around that time too. Sometimes the thing you need to think about are what students weren't being communicated with. If they weren't eligible for those scholarships at our school, we realized there was a couple months where students may or may not have been getting any communication. So as you look at drip communications, even if it's a little bit more not your traditional applicant drip or your deposit drip, but if you're looking at a drip around honors colleges, or you're looking at drips around other things on campus, what I always really recommend, if you're populating students filtering students into different areas, if you have one for intramurals and art and maybe the science club, in just 3 examples, make sure you have one that is all-encompassing, that catches everyone that doesn't fall into one of those areas. So they still get communicated with and don't have 2-month gaps where they're not hearing anything from your institution.
Absolutely. So up next is really knowing your audience. And we're gonna kind of go deeper into this. But we always like to say that, it's really knowing who are the students that you're serving. And I know that I think I knew plenty of folks like this. I probably was one of them.
Yeah, that was a doctor for me.
Yeah. But we know, you have to know your audience, and you have to know the types of students that you're serving. And there are going to be a variety of them. I mean, we only are going to give an example of a couple, but there's anything from the students that, the social scene is critically important to them. We all know those students. There's students that are very academically driven, and the whole purpose of their attending college is to, strive to be academically proficient. To your student athletes, to your students that are involved in theater and arts and so forth. So it's really super important to know who your students are. Just an example that we have a client that we work with that we were discussing getting to know their students. And they said specifically, our students are the ones that are on the front lines, that they are civically engaged, that they're actively involved with their community. And so that's what we want to communicate, the opportunities that they're going to have here at our institution, and really appeal to them of changing the world.
Yeah, and the thing we're showing with that's very stark difference with just 2 images, we realize there's more out there. But the thing is, you will have students coming to your school, and obviously you'll get a pulse of your traditional, what's your average student, but you'll have people coming for that social steam, ready to go to the party. You'll have people coming ready to make a difference. They're excited to be out of their house and go out and change the world in a very activist. And you have students who are just there, their academics are important. And so understanding and opportunities where you're able to identify those different opportunities in your CRM, communicate with them differently. But when you do have to overarchingly communicate with that population, understand that you're reaching out to a bunch of students who are very different.
Absolutely. And I think it's really super important that when you find your voice, that you write to how we speak. This is stuff that we want to use concise and everyday language. We definitely want to work with short sentences. I mean, a lot of times I think at a fault are blaming this generation for the fact that their attention span is this big. But let's be honest, my attention span has gotten this big. And if I am reading an email, and if it doesn't grab me in the first sentence, that's it. I'm already moved on to something else, probably watching a video at the same time. I mean, I'm very much as guilty of what we're accusing this generation of doing, but it's something I think that we've all embraced. And so be able to provide that short, concise information of what's important and why does it matter.
And there's no questions about it. So I say that you need to use rhetorical questions sparingly. If a student can literally read your message and answer it with a shoulder shrug or a meh, it's probably not hitting home. And if there's an impact that you're wanting to make in that message, it isn't going to happen because they've already looked at the questions that you asked them and they kind of, I don't care, or not that important. It's not to say you can't use any rhetorical questions, but making sure the impact of that rhetorical question makes them think a little bit more, makes them go and want to dig into that communication.
And with them. With them. So what's in it for me? That's such a big and critical question when really looking at all of the communications that you're providing, is because at the end of the day, you're not just overly communicating. You're not just throwing content out to the wind and hoping that they're getting it. There's a purpose behind why you're communicating this. And really the question for the student is, why is it in it, or what's in it for me? And so how am I going to benefit from this? If it is transactional, is it clear in terms of what is it that I need to do in order to move forward?
In addition to being dynamic, you also want to be personal, which is more than just being dynamic. So you want your students to feel like they're chosen by your university. So it goes from the old school think of like, we are so great, check out our rankings, to you're unique, and this is how your presence on our campus is going to impact our campus and how you're going to meet your goals on our campus. It's taking that shift from us as an institution to them as an individual and what they are going to gain and how your university is going to support their personal growth and meeting their goals. Is going to be huge if you can do that.
Absolutely. And sharing experience is critical. Student stories are probably one of the most powerful attributes you can provide in a communication. But remember, it has to be in manageable form. And so, sending out an email that has a humongous quote, albeit a great quote it is, if it's significant, it's not going to get read. And so it's really super important that if you are doing student stories, which you should be doing student stories because that's your bread and butter. I mean, that's your selling points. If it's a link out to a YouTube video where they get to interact with it, if it's something that they want to see on their time, it's not just something that you drop into an email and hope that they're ingesting.
You're going to want to take it easy on the idioms. Data idioms like cut it up with the chancellor, or let's take it to the street. This really goes back to, what, you're not going to go? It really goes back to that point that you need to know your audience. And so you might hear these and it might make sense for your university, but if every university tried to use those statements, it's not always going to work. It's not going to hit home. So particularly when you have a diverse audience, really be easy on those idioms and see what you can get out of it and what you can change to make sure your overall communication is going to all the population.
Absolutely. And something that I definitely was very guilty of when I was creating communication flows, especially when it came to applying or coming out for an open house, is stay positive. And what I mean by that is you don't want to use words like, don't miss your chance, don't forget, register now. I mean, they're all very sales tactic-y, but they also read as sales tactics. And so you really want to make sure that you're staying positive in terms of remember to submit your application. And again, really making sure that call to action is very clear, more so than you're missing your chance or having that kind of negative spin on it.
Yeah, and no, we always want to do it because it feels like we put a fire under them that makes them do it. But it also, again, trying to be positive. And with all of these, it's not that you can't do any of them. It's just being easy or being paying attention to what those look like in your communication flow, and that every message is negative, negative, negative.
Absolutely.
So next up, we're going to do the multi-channel communication flow. We'll go to the next slide.
Sure.
So first of all, if you are only doing a single channel communication flow, those times are done. You really want to make sure that you're getting multi-channel, and that's going to be different for each school. Again, it's about growing on what you're currently doing. If you only do one thing or two, if you're only doing emails and print now, how do you add text messaging on that? How do you add this? And on the next slide, it really shows our students and their parents, they're in the middle of everything. They're getting things from social media, they're getting emails, they're getting print, they're going to websites, they're on chatbots, the artificial intelligence is there. They're getting digital marketing outside of just going to a social channel. You know, we're doing rooftop marketing, we're doing IP targeting. We are stalking our students in every way possible that we can legally. And they're used to it. You talk about certain things around your phone, next thing you know, you're being served ads for the thing you talked about. So they grew up with this, and they're going to expect it, even from universities, that they're getting hit from every channel. And so really, we want students to understand. I mean, we all felt like this, you know, just get the communication right. That'd be great. And it's true. That's what we want to do. But, you know, the big thing we want to do is get in the flow. So as I've kind of already alluded to, this seamless communication and transition between channels, this is expected from students, from parents. Honestly, think of yourself on the other side of a brand. It's expected. You're expecting to see the brand where you want to see them. And then understanding that print is not separate from all other channels. And really, no channel is separate from the other channels. They're seamless. One example is if you have a print piece and you can actually put a snap code directly on the print piece that goes to a landing page. So you went from print to using a social app that most students are going to have that actually just redirects them to a landing page where they can potentially watch a video, and now they're watching multimedia on a landing page after going through an app after getting a print piece. So how do they all connect? That social that Snapchat code is now almost just a quicker way of doing a URL. And so where are those little things that it doesn't really cost you more to use that Snapchat code to get a person from print to web? Where are those opportunities to add those in?
Absolutely. And this is an example is going to be your search process. And so if you're not familiar with search, typically it is most schools will go out and purchase a significant amount of names and then serve them specific communication flows, typically a print piece that basically is trying to get them to inquire into the institution, so to learn more about the institution. This used to be, in my early days of higher education, this was like a set it and forget it, right? Like you send a piece out in the mail and there's a rip-off card that they'd fill out and then they'd drop it back in the mail, and then all the counselors would come together and just start data entering. And you'd set it and you'd forget it. And what came in is what came in, and it was gravy, and then you worked from those leads. Those things are gone. And so, you know, this opportunity of creating one communication flow specifically for your search students, and then just kind of setting it and forgetting it, those days are gone. Again, the personalization that they're expecting once they do become an inquiry or once they do become an applicant, they're expecting that early on. And they're wanting that customization because that's what they are accustomed to. And so unless we separate ourselves within the market, you're never going to be seen. And so the optimization should be happening. Well, then, of course, now we're in a situation now where COVID has thrown us completely into a loop. College Board and ACT have not administered either test in quite some time. And so, those traditional formats of where we're getting our leads aren't necessarily happening. So it is critical that you're finding other opportunities to still maintain or to be able to get those leads. And really one of the best things that you can do is go back to the list that you already have, especially if you've gotten students that have inquired on their own without you communicating outside. That is a really super hot lead. And whether they may have stepped off for a short period of time, try to re-engage that lead, because that is going to be significantly worth more than any name that you ever have purchased. And so really making sure that you utilize the list that you currently already have is going to be critical, especially in this day and age.
Yeah. And then the next question comes up. There's multiple options out there for search. And can you do it yourself in your CRM, or do you need a marketing partner? Now, there's lots of factors that play into that. Obviously, budget being a big one, resources, CRM abilities. But are there things that you're able to do internally? Are there things you do well, and can you do it? I feel most of you can send emails. And so that's the biggest portion of your search is sending emails. But are you struggling to write them or build the templates around a search? Or landing pages have become, you still get a print piece. We're getting to the point where we're personalizing search a lot more, where we're getting them to fill out mini quizzes and learning about things that they're interested in, and they're getting content within search. Again, being personal, being dynamic already in that search. Also understanding where your leads and what your search call to action is. If your search call to action is just to inquire, just to raise your hand, you're not going to want to send that to your prospects or your inquiries. But if you, as an institution, decide that your search goal is apps, and you're ready to push that at a certain time, or even switch from inquire to apps, you can start sending at least the emails, even if you don't want to mail to all of them. Send those emails, send that search email, especially if it has that unique personalization approach. You should be using that across channels when you can, and maybe in your CRM it marks if they've done the personal quiz or not. And then make sure you're pushing that in other channels if they have it and they're ready to the deposit stage. What benefits can you get by getting them to do that personal quiz? So it can, sometimes you can do a lot of search internally, you can do it all externally. A lot of times I think most schools have the opportunity to a combination of partnering with the appropriate marketing partner and doing some internally, which in long term, it's going to save some money, and that budget, that's going to be was one of the big issues too.
Absolutely, and I think that one thing that's important to remember too, and I definitely felt this way early on in my career, is that you run through the 10 emails and the print piece for your search campaign, you didn't hear them respond, they didn't do anything, so therefore those leads are dead. They're not. I mean, and that's where you can really, kind of what Corey was saying, is re-engage those students throughout that pipeline. Just because they didn't answer, one of the first 10 emails doesn't mean if you serve them and apply now that they're not going to consider it and they're not going to start an application. And so don't consider really any of your leads unless they say, hey, don't talk to me, I'm done, I want to be unsubscribed. Obviously, then you'll want to unsubscribe and then not communicate. But all other leads, I mean, don't count a lead out.
And true to the understanding of all of this too is the best thing about doing it internally or having a marketing partner that can come and get in your CRM, even if you don't want to run it, is the transparency into the data. You're able to see open rates. You're able to pull lists from different areas if they opened but didn't interact. You get that transparency into that data. If you're using your own form tool and it's going directly into your CRM, you're seeing a little bit of that instant gratification.
Absolutely.
I was always checking my reports and refreshing to see my students come in because I sent that email, and now I'm seeing the fruits of that by students filling this out. And unlike some other opportunities where it's set, forget, you look for opportunities to improve. Are you looking at the last 4 sends and you're like, there was a very obvious time that this sent and worked well. Maybe I'm going to adjust my future time and send because we want this to be best. It goes right up there with knowing your skills. Some of us don't have the right skills. Some of us do. Some of us drop our pizza on the floor as soon as we get it. But it really is understanding your university, your budget, your team, your CRM. It's a lot of factors that go into that. But understanding all those, understanding what skills that you do have and what you don't have, and meshing that together.
Absolutely. And I think too, this really resonated to me for like admissions counselors, right? Is because I think oftentimes that we give them a list and we're like, here, just call these students. But how much more impactful when you know something about them. So going back to those click-through rates is that you can see a student that may have clicked on a campus visit. So informing your admissions counselor then to continue that conversation about visiting campus, again, it just reinforces that fact that you know who the student is, that what is important to them matters to you, and that you're there to help support them in that fashion. All right, so next steps. So I had a colleague, or not a colleague, I had a professor years and years and years ago, and this really, of course, resonated with me. And he'd always ask, how do you eat a giant pink elephant?
To be fair, I didn't know the answer.
Corey was completely lost on this one. I think maybe it's a Southern thing, but he would always resonate with one bite at a time. And that's, I think, so critical and so important, is we've just thrown a lot of information at you. And so with all this great information now, what do you do with it? And for me, sometimes I found that the more information and more content and data that I had, the more it paralyzed me, because I kind of got stuck in the weeds and it really didn't know what to do, how to move forward in order to be successful in that fashion. So it is super important that you prioritize what is important to you, what is critical right now. When you're going through that audit, what is it that our messaging is great? What can we start off with that we know is going to be a good set? And what's appropriate for the timeline? I very much am an advocate of the timeline because it'll help guide you in terms of what are the next things that we need to be talking about. Obviously, right now, you need to be talking about enrollment and trying to prevent melts. So that's one area that I truly would focus on, especially if that's a challenge for you at your institution. And then prepping for your next class. Fall 2021 is going to be here before we know it. And we know it's wildly different, but we need to start that communication now in terms of setting that stage. And so that's, I think, a great way to start to say, okay, you know, let's look at what we need and what we need right now, and let's start there, writing an email.
Yeah, one of the things that, and it's going to depend on your university size, the university makeup, and that's the hard thing about some of these webinars. We're talking in generalities and realize everyone's struggle is slightly different, even though at the top end, we probably struggle through the same things. But there are opportunities to delegate responsibilities through this process. So, you know, I was from a smaller school, so we involved our admission counselors, which were really assistant directors at the school I was at. And so we actually were required, and we divvied up all the academic programs. And every late spring, after travel season, we came back, we would be required to go to the program directors and interview them and get at minimum 5 bullet points. So, you know, what are they doing in the classroom? What unique things have they done? Do they have partnerships with businesses and corporations? What are the alumni doing? Because alumni usually stayed very connected, especially the first few years, with the faculty that they loved. And then, you know, following up and getting those stories. And the big part about that is then you could use that, and if you're at a bigger school or a smaller school, can you delegate responsibilities across departments? So I think sometimes we work in silos, and if you're in university, if you're in admissions marketing, can you go to the marketing department? If they're in marketing department, can you go to the admissions department and find out what stories you know? It's amazing to me how many times the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's talking about. So where are opportunities to increase transparency between departments? That, you know, here's what we have on alumni for these programs, and shared documents or meetings every so often. And then also using that information that you're gathering, create multi-use content. So we would take those bullet points, and obviously we use those to inform our email communication. That's what the main thing we got them for anyway. But then we would make that into kind of a two-page, depending on many programs, PDF. It was part of our training document for new counselors that we hired, new people that were going to be behind, you know, in college fair, answering student emails, answering phone calls, and they don't know anything about these programs, and reading the website can be really tough for every program. But they went, you had this bullet point, you had a cheat sheet list, and at least for the first couple weeks, you could at least be helpful just by getting those bullet points, and then you just started learning more and more as you went.
I used to take with my admissions team is we would create a 30-second, when we're at a college fair, we have 30 seconds that we've got to interest that. What is it in 30 seconds that I can say to them that's going to engage them to where they want to continue to talk with me? And like Corey said, that's a great opportunity to be able to gather that information, which is great for content, but then it's also great for additional training for your team members. And of course, again, we've given you a lot of information here. And it's just really super important to realize that don't get overwhelmed. And I know that is easier said than done. I've definitely been in that. I'm sure you have as well too, where you're just in the muck of it because you've got to get all this content out, and all of it, of course, is important. But by stressing out and spreading yourself too thin, you're doing exactly what you're trying not to do. And that's ensure that you're providing good, clear communication that's going to be appropriate and helpful to the students. So it's really super important that you bite off pieces of that elephant that you can know that you can accomplish it, and you can accomplish it well. So it's just really super important to try not and overwhelm yourself as best you possibly can. And that goes into, we're here to help. As hopefully you have gathered already, Corey and I are incredibly passionate about higher education and communications. It's something that was both dear and near to our hearts in our professional roles when we were on the college side. But we really want to be an extension of your institution. It's something that we know what a pain point this process is, and that you've got so many hats to begin with, and there's so much that's going on that you get overwhelmed very, very easily. And we're really here to support you in whatever facet that may be, regardless of budget. It can be writing an email content. It can be creating an entire communication flow for you as well too. But we're as passionate to see the success of our institutions as the institutions themselves.
Yeah, and when I think about communication, it is an area that I have history and worked with a lot. And so being able to jump in at Media Cross as a senior lead strategist and think about things with my my partners, my clients, and to have those conversations. We've done everything from straight up audits to just building an email template. They just need a better looking email template. They could handle the copy, or we've done full email copy. We've done HTML coding. We've done deployed search in CRMs. It's run the gamut from the small, we just need one email template, to the extra everything here that we just talked about, as well as digital marketing on top of that, and running landing pages and going through that. So we are here to help. We empathize with you. We've been there. You know, I think one time when I was on the other side of the desk, I used to think, you work with a marketing company, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, which you can, and we appreciate that. But realistically, it's not possible with budgets. And we know COVID has added strain onto budgets and enrollments, and the unknowns have added so much in here that budgets are being frozen or reduced. We are here as a strategic partner. If you want to have more conversations, you know, Josh, myself, Jessica, our VP of Higher Education, are always here. Just even have that first conversation to maybe talk you off the ledge and make sure you like things are okay. We can get through this.
Absolutely, and really, I think it's supportive as well too. And a lot of times, I felt like I can write the email content, I can put out, you know, templates and so forth, but it's the digital side that I'm just completely not aware with. That's really truly where, again, we're specialists in this. We're very familiar, and we can support you in whatever that means in terms of that process for you. All right, so time for some Q&A. We'll kind of hop in here.
We have to do. One does not simply give a presentation without Q&A.
No.
I'll ask you, Josh.
Oh. All right.
Okay, so great one. And you have more Slate experience than I do.
Oh, good.
So does Slate have the ability to recognize date-specific messages versus drip?
Yes, both. So I was a Slate school. We implemented Slate at my last institution. We were in it for about 3 years before my departure. So Slate is very robust. Slate has the capabilities that where you can set up a drip campaign, and then you can also set up specific date communications. One thing that I did really enjoy about Slate is going back to your drip campaign. If you had, say, a Happy Holidays email in that drip campaign, or if you have something that, you know, your honors application is accessible to everybody up until March 1st. After March 1st, this is done. You can set an end date for that email. And so you can say, hey, March 1st, no longer send this email out. And regardless of where that student came in, they're not going to see that email. So Slate does make it pretty easy. I think a lot of, if you're on Salesforce, TargetX, I believe the experience is pretty similar.
Yeah. And thank you, Danielle, for that. Can you split test drip campaigns? So loaded question. Depending on your CRM, yes. I always felt I was the king of, like, I know the functionality I want, and if my tool didn't do it, again, what I said earlier, think outside the box. What are different ways you can use? So if you really don't have your CRM tool, or you're not using a CRM tool, doesn't have that ability, what I would do is just split your population as best as possible and run mirror campaigns that do the same exact thing, same exact messages, and change the split portion of it. Is that subject line what it is? And if you have a CRM tool that just doesn't have the split functionality for like A/B testing, maybe it is you just look at the filter you build to build those audiences, pulls the first letter last name, and it's A through, you know, whatever the middle alphabet is. K.
Yeah.
We'll go with K. And then the rest on the other one. So I always thought outside the box, like if I want to do something, there's got to be a logical way that I can with the tool that I have. Would it be easier with other tools? Certainly. But that was always something again. So a lot of times you can, and it depends on the tool. What should we be saying to incoming students if we don't have the details about fall?
Oh, this is like, I think, the question of the hour. Well, try to get a decision about fall as quickly as possible. And I know that's not always the easy or the best answer out there, but we've seen in specific data that students that have already been communicating plans for fall, that they're very much appreciative of it, because again, it's giving them the opportunity to set up what exactly is happening. If you are truly unaware, and there's 1,000 different plans, and I think a lot of institutions are out there that they could go one way versus the other versus a totally different. I think honesty is the best route to go out here. You obviously don't want to put out a communication that says, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what's going on. But being clear to say, these are our options. There may be 3 options, right? There's the complete online version, there is the hybrid version, and then there is the I'm fully back and operational, which it doesn't sound like most of our institutions are fully back and operational. But having those 3 options and saying, this is what we're doing, and if we go this route, this is how we're going to prepare for it. If we go this route, this is how we're going to make sure that your students are going to be successful and that they're going to be safe, because that, I think, is the 2 big concerns from parents and families to students, is just being as clear and honest. And sometimes, I personally, I'm getting a little tired of the we're all in this together. But we are, we are all in this together, and we're all kind of trying to figure this out. And I think being clear on that really does, I think, put a sense of ease to the process.
And I think being clear and giving a clear understanding of where they can continue to go to get information. So I would assume many of you have a COVID web page already existing that was really designed because it happened during the school year, mainly for your current students, and having that plan, because it went from this date that, oh, this is what's going on, to this date that like campuses are closed and this is what we're doing. And so really having that clear communication there. If there's an opportunity and you have the resources to make one specific for new students, that messaging is a little different. Similar exact conversation, just messaging slightly different, and giving a constant communication like, this is what we know now. We will continue to make decisions in the best interests of our students, but continue to come back here, and we will continue to communicate. We've also done right now, so you think about what can you do quickly. Print pieces to get out before students come back to campus. Timeline's getting shorter and shorter as we go. And so that turnaround, unless you do it in-house, might be a little harder, but digital can be out. You can do social ads, social targeting, social retargeting to pages to ensure they know. If you want to make a little social campaign regarding about the social distancing and how it's happening on campus, the what is or is not the requirement of mask and wear on campus, just a little bit, just the knowledge, so that they're aware and they're hearing that it may be scary that these things are happening, but you're addressing them directly.
Absolutely. And I think if there are going to be, I mean, we all know this is a tough time for all of us, but there are those nuggets of positivity and things that are going well and things that this epidemic has, I think, thrust upon us that we can really celebrate. And, it's a time of where we have to think creativity. We have to be innovative in terms of what we're doing. And so celebrating those opportunities, whether that's something that's happening campus-wide, if you have a student that is making masks for, at hospitals or for their relatives or neighbors, celebrating those small wins, I think, is what we need to hear. And I think that students really respond well when you're recognizing your current students or prospective students or incoming students for the good work that they're doing, but it also is creating that environment and that sense of community that is so critical to an institution. So we've got, when do you stop reaching out to a student?
Well, which communication? No. Email's free, so send it all day. Really what it comes down to, the reason I am always hard off, I forget what year it was, but I had a student named Corey, which is nice, it's a great name. But he is from Southern Missouri, and I did my follow-up. He went to a school that did well. I was lucky I had geodemography. It said he was a good fit for our school. I had many things to say to continue to follow up the student, but I just continued to follow up. Literally after a scholarship competition, him and his parents came up, and he literally told me, like, the reason I came is because you kept calling. You kept emailing. I'm like, man, he's making me sound bad, but it got him there. And he thrived at the university, stayed all 4 years, and graduated and is doing great now. But that's the thing, it's a balance. I've seen more schools start doing, trying to gather information. So a short, more like BuzzFeed style quiz, like a survey tool, that would be like, and they may use memes within that of like, hey, are you ready to make a decision? And it's meh, you get the angry cat, like, no, I don't want your school. Go through that thing of giving them a unique way to respond that's not just an email like, no, thank you. Or as many of us have probably received, the very angry student who curses you out and then you have to tell on him. But it really is that opportunity to really understanding where your student is, where they are in the funnel, where you're going to continue communicating, and is it costing you money? But if there's a survey tool that then can opt them out, you basically give them opportunity, you've called, you've done that. It's a balance. And I guess sometimes that question and answer is, how are your numbers? Your VP might have a different response to you if your numbers aren't great, like you're going to continue calling that person. But if you're doing well, you may not.
Absolutely. And I think too is give them an out, right? A lot of students, a lot of times they're like, they don't necessarily know how to say thank you, but no thank you. And so giving them the opportunity where they can say no thank you. I mean, obviously you don't want to do that the first email going out saying, hey, welcome. You sure you want to get these emails? But I mean, if you've been communicating with them regularly and you're seeing that they're not engaging with you, at that point that, it's deposit time, you may just do we used to do a text that would say, hey, we hope you choose us, but if you don't, that's okay, respond no. And then that gets you out of the pipeline. You can focus on those that truly are still engaged with the institutions. So sometimes it just is giving them the opportunity where they can say, I don't necessarily want to be communicating with them any longer. All right, so we just want to thank you for joining us today. We do want to kind of put a nice little plug out there for our next challenge, which is going to be on research, Thursday, July 16th.
Yeah, don't let research scare you. Is the first thing. It's a really great. We'll actually have Dr. James Weinberg with us. He is our partner researcher that we work with often. He is great. And again, similar to today, we will be talking about big pictures and research and what it looks like. But on top of that, we want to give you some practical things with research that you can do in-house or research what you can use it for. There's many things we talked about today that I would use certain data points or research to help drive my behavior and what I was going to do to the students. And our avatar's got a nice July 4th upgrade, which is great. Our creative team's having a lot of fun with our pictures, which is great. But we really do want to thank you spending an hour today. Hopefully it broke up your day, wasn't too boring for a webinar. We want you to be excellent to each other, which is important. But we really do appreciate it. If you ever need anything from us, please feel free to reach out. We're both on LinkedIn. Corey Baker's a pretty common name, but
Josh Nostromowitz is not.
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to us. You can reach back out to the emails. You can always contact us, and we will be sending an email about the research webinar coming up very shortly.
And if you did not catch the full webinar today, we also be sending out a link of the recorded version as well too. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.